I guess if a person comes to a place where they're not writing something to be read, because that doesn't really matter. I guess they just have to write, and they don't really know why. They just have to. Why even bother to? Why not just keep that to yourself? Why not? Why even pursue? Even trying to share it with anyone, or I mean, why not just keep the pages in your room and never show them to anyone?
You know, Marcus Aurelius, his meditations, they were never meant for public consumption. He didn't write so that you and I could sit and read his book one day. You know, Cassie, I don't know who wrote the book, The Cloud of Unknowing. The author is unknown, but it is such a good book. You know, there are different stages in life. You know, some of it has to do with greed. You know, a few weeks ago I was going through all the things I'd been writing over the years, and I realized I had done a generic book on classical and modern humanities. So I've spent the past 2 weeks just going through them, and then I'm going to send this book to be published. If you had asked me about 5 years ago, would I be interested? I would say no, it's ridiculous. Part of it has to do with something about you stays behind long after you're dead. The other part is hopefully the kids will be interested and they can just type your name, like, yeah, I had this lousy father, I'm just going to Google to see, you know, if there are any bad raps about him. And maybe a couple of books can come up and they say, oh, well, the guy wasn't a douchebag after all, perhaps. You know. The other is greed, that, you know, it's not bad to have your name out there. It doesn't impact the way you look at yourself. You know, so there are these different stages. You know, there are also practical reasons for them. Number one, you're young and you need to write and you need to be published, and hopefully it'll help in securing a full-time position. It makes your life so much easier, where you no longer have to beg ridiculous people for a class here and a class there. You know, that kind of independence is really, really, really healthy. Hopefully, you know, you'll get to a place, not you, just generally speaking, where what you wanted to keep hidden, now you want to reveal because you understand it and you see the value in it and you want to share that with other people. I think it'll be a great thing for your daughter. It'll be a great thing for your friends, for your parents, especially parents who enjoy just seeing their kids prosper in some shape or form. The other thing is, look at this house. I have all these books. Eventually, your book and my book will be lost in the sea of books. It doesn't matter what you write and how many of them you sell. They'll be forgotten. You know, there is a verse, I think it's in the Gospel of Luke, that if you have a lamp and it's lit, why would you want to put a cover on it? You know, remove, the covering and let it illuminate its surrounding. You know, if you write well, Cassie, if there is honesty in your writing, this humanities book I'm working on is completely useless. The other books are useless as well, but this one is really, really useless. It's completely ridiculous. If you write and you're an honest writer, you will learn so much by going back and forth. It really is like a new relationship where you have to just wrestle with your companion until you learn how to work with him. I read Masnavi some 35 years ago. And I was working on a piece on education. Started like 800 pages. And one day I said, I don't want to work on that book anymore. I want to do something different. Today I'm in a different mood. So I picked up the Masnavi and I said, well, and I had translated the first 34 lines already. So let me just see what this is all about. So maybe I should just start writing on the words, just some commentary. And you kind of get to see your own unveilings. Something about you, the layers are just removed and you get a chance to see your own evolution a little bit. There is nothing wrong with that. You could also take the other path, which is you could remain completely invisible. There's nothing wrong with that. We had a friend, Muhammad Haqi. Did you ever meet him? No, it was before your time. He had his MD from University of Shiraz. He had his acupuncture degree from University of Maryland. He had his PhD in philosophy from Oxford. And he had his degree in herbalism from Iran. And he had a teacher who was 20 years younger than he was. He was 50 when I met him. His teacher was 30. He lived in Berkeley he had no private bathroom or shower or kitchen. Had to be shared with like 20 other people. He would come to Rosalind sit with us like every week for 3-4 days. He was extremely invisible. If no one asked him a question, he would never say anything. The only reason I know of his degrees is because I forced him to give me his resume so I could try to find him a job. But if you were to ask him a question, he would give you this profoundly delicious sermon for like 10 hours. It was really beautiful. It didn't matter on what topic. He was like one of those Costco people, you know. Eventually he gained some popularity and he moved to Los Angeles. He had a wife in Canada. He divorced. He had 2 kids. Just didn't see them. He went to get a cup of coffee a few years ago from Starbucks. A car hit him and died. He died. But the point I'm trying to make is that despite who he was on the inside, he was hidden. I'm not really quite sure which is best. You know, your writings right now are very, very, very personal. Add to it, I'm not talking about your writing just in general. Add to it the fact that you're also very private. Add to it also the fact that you're also very shy and reserved. So the idea of, for example, you writing something personal and then publishing it for everyone to see, it's really, really, really embarrassing, you know. What are your friends going to say? Your parents, your husband, your daughter, your students, your dean may in fact fire you, you know. But there was a model in Spain. I saw the picture a few weeks ago. she had gone to visit her friend, and the friend had a tiny little dog. So she bent over to just say hello to the dog, and the dog just bit off this part of her face, the lip part. And she was a model, very attractive. And now she walks around. She couldn't put it back surgically. It had gone bad. So she just walks around with this part of her mouth just showing the gum and the meat and all that. I mean, just consider for a moment, if you're a model, a good amount of who you think you are is related to your body, you know, and how attractive you are. It makes you very rich, very popular. You're like an attention grabber. Then you lose part of your face. It makes you profoundly unattractive. Not just unattractive, I remember when my uncle was here, after the car wash, I had gone to the Subway and I got a foot-long turkey sandwich. The young woman who was making my sandwich, her face she had just broken out in such a bad way. And so this is about 40 years ago, Cassie. So you need to understand how traumatic an experience this was for me. So I bring the sandwich home, and we're sitting with my uncle. And as I'm taking the first bite, her face comes into my mind. And I throw up. I couldn't eat the sandwich. Imagine now you're walking around as a model, but this part of your face is gone. I have no doubt you just kind of go inside your closet and you just hide there. Because people are no longer going to look at you and say, wow, how attractive. Women are not going to be jealous of you. People are going to look at you and feel disgust. It's a very kind of private thing. It took her many, many, many years to be able to just kind of accept the fact that this is who she is. She now walks around. And writing is very much the same way, because your heart, your guts are out. People are able to see all the things you've been hiding for the past 30, 40, 50, 60 years. It's no different than Daughter of Fire, really. The only reason why all these academicians have a job and they can go into the classroom and talk endlessly is because they don't really share anything about themselves, because there is nothing to share. They're really quite cheap. Jackie, I'm sorry I've talked so much.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Cassie, you met me when we used to go to gatherings. The lights could be on, it could be off. I would sing nevertheless. But the way it all started was that
You had the death in front of your face.
first I demanded that the lights be turned off. It didn't matter where I was. The host was forced to turn off the lights. I'm not saying I had a good voice, you know, because I was shy. But more importantly, because when I would sing, I had all these like expressions on my face, and they had to do with all the feelings and emotions I had on the inside and how they were connected to the lyrics, to the poems. And I didn't know the people there. And I didn't want them to see my face. It was too personal, too private. As time passed, people would refuse to turn off the lights. You know, they would say, "You're a guest here, you can't tell us," you know. So I said, "Okay, well, give me that drum. I know you've never seen, maybe you have, Jackie, it's a big..." So the deaf, I would hold it in front of my face, you know, and then I would sing. Then there came a point where I just didn't care. And I also knew that when I would sing, it would put the audience in a certain mood. And so when I went to Hussein's house or Hussein Yun's house or Kazim's house, I felt very comfortable just closing my eyes and just singing. And I think these are just stages that all of us have to go through whenever there is something that's very personal, you know. I don't mean to, but this is the third or fourth or fifth time that Jackie is here. You know what happens when she comes in. She takes over the conversation. You know. But the point is, شبان آهسته می نالم مگر رازم نهان ماند به گوش هر که در عالم رسد آواز فریادم. That شبان آهسته می نالم. When night comes, I shall whisper my laments, my grief, my sadness, because I don't want strangers to hear them. The things you have with your writings are the things that Jackie has with her thoughts. They're very private, they're very personal. They contain a lot of emotions. You know, and that's true for all of us about different things. Jackie, anything? Stacy, anything? Cassie, anything?
I think I've asked. I don't want to be greedy.
I mean, nobody else is.
It's not really a question. I don't remember if, she says anything in Daughter of Fire about. I know she said that she couldn't even look at her journals for a long time because it was like a panic. There was too much pain involved in it. But I wonder, do you think that she really cared what people would think of her? Didn't she just come to a point where she accepted
trauma is devastating. Trauma is something that, it's an experience. It creates a good amount of confusion, frustration, irritation, anxiety, fear, doubt. Most of us are lucky enough to have experiences that only live on top of, the surface of who and what we are. When there is trauma, it's like the root, it becomes the root of who you are. It's like a tree. If you get rid of the main roots, the tree will just die. So trauma lives inside your soul. And about 80-90% of the time it governs your emotions, governs your thinking patterns, governs your physical movements. It's difficult. I'm thinking, I don't exactly know, how Irina was with Bhai Sahib. But Bhai Sahib was a traumatic experience. The only difference is that Irina loved him. And the idea of him not being around never occurred to her, initially at least. And trauma is trauma, whether it has caused you kind of negative things or positive things. Because the underlying factors of trauma contain a good amount of pain, you try to run away from it. You find ways to distract yourself so that you don't have to see it, you have to feel it. And it's difficult to just feel all the time. And remember, the sort of experience that Irina has with Bhai Sahib, it kind of makes for a very, very lonely life, lonely inner life. Irina can't go around sharing her experience with people because she knows nobody can understand. You know, as it took her some time to adjust to Bhai Sahib, and it took her some ways to adjust to his ways, and some time for her to adjust to kind of the loneliness that the path created for her on the inside. You know, so if you look at the book, it starts with her having a lot of questions. Then, with, you know, mild confusion and doubt, then it becomes anger and hatred. Then it becomes no question. Then it becomes, I just like to go there and sit. So I am thinking that, you know, how do you deal with the loss of a man who has changed who you are, who has given you something that no one else could have or had ever, and no one even comes close in comparison to him? You know, and the wound, the love is still so fresh that every time she wants to think about writing this or thinking about him, it's too much for her. You know, you know, I haven't seen Carolyn for 2-3 months now. I think in the past maybe few months I have heard from her maybe twice. Well, if she was to email me, for example, what can she say? She's going through so much. You know, as a woman who's getting old, as a woman who's just lost her daughter, as a woman who has this feeling of being completely alone and isolated, you know. And imagine if she was to write to me an email that's very revealing of all these different aspects of her. It's devastating, it would crush her, it's too much. You know. I think all of us run away from haunting emotions. You know, for some of us it just takes longer to just stop. And my uncle had been married for, I don't know, 50 years when his wife died. I think I've told you this story. His kids wanted to, well, he wanted to put up a tent in the cemetery. And in Iran you can do that. At least you could. I don't know these days. And he wanted to just kind of live near the grave, you know. And his kids kind of realize that day after day he's becoming less and less and less. He's just diminishing. And you're talking about Iran, you're talking about a guy who's old school. And it's not like America, you know, where you don't believe in therapy. You know, there is nothing really to be healed from. It's just one of those events, you know, people were born and they die. But the kids wanted to find a way to distract him from thinking about his wife, thinking about loneliness, despair, you know, living in a tent by the graveside. So they got him married. Initially he said no, but even he came to realize it's just difficult. I mean, what the hell do I do after 50 years of marriage? I come home and there's no one there. I don't want to eat by myself. And he's a man. And like any person, you know, he's just proud. He doesn't want to depend on his kids. He says okay to marriage. It had some good moments, the second marriage. But for the most part, it was just awful. You know, I don't know what Irina did in those 10 years of, you know, the loss. You know, and the other thing, Cassie, is that, you know, when you're a student like Irina, you don't have space to think on your own. And there is no reason to, because you come to kind of realize and accept the fact you're just incompetent. You know, you may be a flashlight, but when the sun is out, you kind of just turn off the flashlight. You know, unless you happen to be Diogenes. You know, Irina in the presence of Bhai Sahib feels incompetent, and he's the only source of nourishment. And when Bhai Sahib is there, nobody's going to ask you questions. You're not going to talk. If you have any humility and respect about you, you're not going to open your mouth and kind of give a sermon when your teacher is sitting right there. And if you've been in that particular environment for 7, 9, 10 years, you know, you kind of think of yourself as nothing. What exactly do you want to publish? Your life means nothing without your teacher. Your writing is nothing. So it takes some time for her to kind of just gain some maturity, for her to blossom, you know, so that she can begin to kind of formulate her thinking and then express it to an audience. It really is a very difficult maturing process.